She thought it was just a photo, a simple snapshot on a quiet Sunday. But the moment she zoomed in, her world started to crumble. It was late afternoon, the golden light pooling in the backyard like spilled honey. Emily stood next to her father, both smiling, arms wrapped around each other in the way families do when they're trying to freeze a moment of happiness. Her mom had called out, "One more," and snapped the picture with an old Canon, the kind her dad swore took real photos. They laughed. Nothing felt wrong. Not yet. Emily was 27. Her father, Howard, had just turned 62. He'd always been strong, steady like a lighthouse. A man of quiet words and warm hands, the type of father who showed his love. In actions, not speeches. Fixing her car, packing her lunch even when she was in college. Calling her kiddo with that voice roughened by years of cigarette smoke and cold mornings. That weekend had been special. He hadn't been feeling well, and something in Emily had insisted on spending the day with him. They had grilled steaks, played gin rummy, talked about nothing and everything. When her mom asked for the photo, Emily didn't resist. She wanted to remember this. Later that night, alone in her apartment, she scrolled through the pictures. One in particular caught her attention, the last one, her favorite. The light hit just right, illuminating the side of her father's face. His smile was real, his hand rested gently on her shoulder. Safe, familiar, but then something. A flicker, a detail her brain hadn't caught at first. She zoomed in, and then, again and again, the hairs on her arms stood up. Her chest tightened. Her breath turned shallow. Behind them, barely visible between the hedge and the garden shed, was a face. Not a full one, just part, but unmistakably human. Pale, watching, eyes locked on her father. She stared at it, her thumb trembling on the screen. It wasn't a trick of light, not a leaf or shadow. It was someone, or something. The expression was blank, cold, and wrong. She blinked, looked again. The figure hadn't moved. Of course it hadn't. It was a photo, but something inside. Her shifted, that quiet kind of dread, the kind that comes before the scream. Emily tried to laugh, told herself it was probably a neighbor or a friend playing a prank. But she knew all her neighbors. No one had come over. No one had been invited. She checked the timestamp, 5:42 p.m. Her mom had been in the kitchen, her dad beside her. She remembered the exact moment. There had been no one else there, so who was in the photo? Sleep didn't come easy. Her thoughts tangled in impossible knots. The next morning she drove back to her parents' house, her hands cold on the steering wheel despite the sun. Her mom opened the door, cheerful at first, until she saw Emily's face. "What's wrong, honey? Where's Dad?" she asked. Her mom's expression faltered. "Out back." "Why?" Emily didn't answer. She walked past her, down the hallway, through the sliding glass door, out into the yard. It was just as she remembered it. The grass damp, the hedge trimmed, the garden shed closed. She walked to the exact spot. The angle from the photo burned into her mind. She looked toward the hedge. There was no way anyone could have stood there without being seen. It was too narrow, and behind it, a fence, solid, old, no gap wide enough for a person. She even checked behind the shed. Nothing. Her father was watering the plants. He smiled when he saw her. Back so soon? She couldn't bring herself to answer, not right away. She just stared at him, studied his face, the creases near his eyes, the way he tilted his head. Finally, she said, "Dad, do you remember taking that photo yesterday?" He nodded, still smiling. "Sure. Your mom's idea. You looked beautiful in it." "I saw something in the picture," she said, her voice low. "Behind us. A face." His smile dropped, just slightly. "But enough." "What kind of face?" he asked. Too calm, she paused. "You didn't see anyone else out here, right?" "No one," he said. But something in the way he said it chilled her. That night, she printed the photo, blown up, in color, studied every inch. The man, if it was a man, was barely visible. just a glimpse between the leaves. But what unsettled her wasn't the figure itself. It was the way the eyes seemed locked not on her, but directly on her father, not the camera, not the background, only him. She flipped through old photo albums, looking for comfort maybe, proof that everything was fine. But then, in a picture from 5 years ago, a 4th of July barbecue, she found it again, not the same photo, not even the same place, but the same face, barely noticeable, peering through a window behind the crowd, cold, still, watching. She dropped the album, her breathing quickened. The room spun. She pulled out another. Christmas, 12 years ago, her and her dad near the tree, gifts in their lap. And there, through the glass door in the background, the same face, same angle, same blank stare, frozen in time. Again and again. Always behind them, always looking at him. She didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. The next morning, she confronted her mom. Mom, has Dad ever mentioned someone following him? Anyone strange from his past? Her mother frowned. What kind of question is that? Emily hesitated. Then she showed her the photos, one by one. Her mother's face drained of color. This has to be a mistake, she whispered. That's just someone, a coincidence. But her voice cracked. Her hands trembled. Emily pressed. Who is he? Her mother looked away. I don't know. She was lying. Later that day, Emily waited until her father was alone, sitting on the porch reading the newspaper like he always did. The normalcy of it made everything worse. She sat beside him, quiet for a while. Then she said, I know he's been there for years. He didn't pretend not to understand. His hands folded, slowly, deliberately. Then he said, I hoped you'd never see him. That's when the panic set in. Something inside her screamed to run, but she stayed. Who is he? She asked. Her father looked out at the yard, the trees, the sun dipping low in the sky, and said, Someone I wronged. A long time ago. Someone who doesn't forget. Emily's mouth went dry. What did you do? He turned to her, eyes filled with something she couldn't name. Regret, fear, love. It's not what I did, he said. It's what I became. She didn't understand. Not yet. But she would, because later that night she found another photo, one she didn't remember taking. It was her, sleeping in her bed and standing in the doorway, barely visible in the darkness, was the same man. This time, he was watching her, and he was closer. Much closer. The photo burned in her hands, not because of what it showed, but because of what it meant. He'd been in her house, not years ago, not as some distant shadow. Last night, while she slept, Emily's hands trembled as she stared at the printed image. It had been slid under her door. No envelope, no message. Just her, curled beneath the blanket. And him. The same figure, standing just inside the doorway, cloaked in darkness. She didn't scream. The fear went deeper than that, past noise. It was the kind of terror that burrowed. She locked every door, checked every window, twice sat with her back to the wall, lights on, phone in hand. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. It's not what I did. It's what I became. And what did that mean? Who was the man, and how long had he been watching her? At dawn, she called her father. He didn't answer. She called again. And again, nothing. She drove back to the house. The neighborhood looked the same, peaceful, birds on wires, sprinklers ticking across manicured lawns. But something felt off, still. Like the world was holding its breath. The front door was unlocked. She stepped inside, slowly. Dad? She called out. No answer. The house was too quiet. Coffee still warm on the table. Jacket still on the hook, like he'd been there just moments ago. She checked every room. Her mother wasn't home. Her father wasn't anywhere. Only one thing was out of place. On the living room couch sat a wooden box she'd never seen before. Old, dusty, with a rusted metal latch. A note was taped to the top. It read, If you found this, I'm already gone. Her stomach dropped. She sat. opened the box. Inside were photographs, dozens, maybe hundreds. Each one dated in shaky handwriting, and in every single one the figure was there. Somewhere. In the corner. In a reflection. A mirror. A window. Never. Fully visible, but always watching. Always near her father. One picture stood out. It was older, grainy, torn on one side. A man stood in the center, young, maybe in his 20s. His eyes familiar, the nose, the jawline. It was her dad, but beside him stood another man, face not visible, blurred by movement or damage, but the posture, the shape. It was him. On the back of the photo were just 4 words. We opened a door. Emily's breath caught. What door? She dug deeper. Beneath the stack of photos was a journal, leather-bound, its pages yellowed with age. Her father's handwriting scrawled in the margins, frantic and uneven. It wasn't a diary. It was a confession. She read, 1979. We thought it was just a story, an old ritual we found in the floorboards of that abandoned chapel near Dry Ridge. Me and Jacob, we were drunk, stupid. We lit candles, said the words. Nothing happened, not that night. But weeks later, I started seeing him. At first, I thought it was a dream, a trick of the light. Then, he followed me, in crowds, in mirrors, in sleep. Jacob died 6 months later. Fell from a fire escape. Only I saw the shadow behind him. No one believed me. I tried to outrun it. Got married. Had Emily. Built a new life. But he never left. Never forgave. He doesn't age. Doesn't change. Just watches. He doesn't want me dead. He wants me afraid. Always. Emily's throat tightened. Her father had carried this alone for decades. Protected her from it. Until now. Why had he given up? She flipped to the last entry, dated 2 days ago. He's watching her now. I thought, if I stayed close, he wouldn't shift focus, but it's happening. I can feel it. She needs to know the truth. I'm sorry, kiddo. That night, she didn't go home. She stayed at a motel. Didn't tell her mom where she was. Couldn't. She stared at the ceiling, journal in her lap, phone clutched to her chest. Every sound outside made her flinch. At 3:14 a.m., someone knocked. Not a loud knock, just a single, deliberate tap. She didn't move. Another tap. She crawled to the door, silent, knees shaking, no footsteps outside, no voices. She pressed her eye to the peephole. Nothing. She didn't sleep again. In the morning she packed. She needed answers. Real ones. The chapel. Dry Ridge. Her father's journal had mentioned it. An abandoned place from their youth. Maybe whatever started there could end there. She drove for hours. Dirt roads, fog-soaked trees, old maps folded in the passenger seat. She found it just past noon. The chapel was barely standing, wood splintered, roof partially collapsed, weeds crawling up the sides like veins. Its front door was chained shut, but a side window was shattered. She climbed through. Inside was silence. Dust thick in the air. Pews rotting, broken glass glinting on the floor. But at the far end, behind what used to be the altar, there was something strange. Symbols carved into the wall. Circles, lines, ancient shapes that pulsed with wrongness. Candles, long melted, still sat in a ring. A metal box lay in the center. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a tape recorder. And a note. "Play this only if you want to see." She pressed play. Her father's voice. Younger, nervous. Jacob's setting up the camera. I don't know why I'm doing this. I guess I just want proof that we're not crazy. Another voice, laughing. Come on, Howard, don't chicken out. Then chanting, low, uneven, the sound of wind, then screaming, not words, not fear, something more primal. Like pain twisted into sound. Emily stopped the tape. She looked around the room, heart pounding. The air felt thicker, like something was watching. She backed out, got in the car, drove until her knuckles went white. That night, back in her apartment, she locked the door. Again, every bolt, every window shut. She stared at herself in the mirror. Tried to see what he might see, but behind her, A Flicker. She turned fast. Nothing there. But on her table, another photo. It hadn't been there before. It was her again. But this time, she wasn't sleeping. She was at the chapel, holding the recorder that same afternoon. It had been taken from outside. Through the window, there was no one else there that day. At least, no one she saw. Tears burned behind her eyes. Her chest heaved. She dropped to her knees. "Why me?" she whispered, and deep inside, a thought surfaced. Maybe it wasn't about her. Maybe it never was. Maybe she was just the way back in. That night she dreamed of her father, but it wasn't him. His eyes were wrong. He stood in the hallway, just like the man in the photos, and said, "You opened the door too, kiddo." Then everything went black. She woke up gasping. Sweat clung to her skin. The sheets tangled like restraints. For a second she didn't know where she was, what day it was, if she was still dreaming. But the photo on the floor told her she wasn't. Same image, her in the chapel. The blurred figure in the trees outside. She picked it up, flipped it over. A new message had been scrawled in red ink. "He's not outside anymore." Her body froze. Every instinct screamed for her to run, to hide, to scream for help. But something deeper, colder, told her that none of it would matter. Because this wasn't a man. It was something else, and it knew her now. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message appeared. "Do you remember the basement?" She dropped the phone like it burned her. There was no way anyone could have known about that. The basement in her childhood home. The one her father always kept locked. The one he never let her near. She hadn't thought about it in years. Until now. She drove. Fast. Barely breathing. Her mother was supposed to be away visiting an aunt in Vermont. The house should have been empty. But when Emily pulled up, the front door was open. Inside was quiet. Too quiet. She stepped in, calling out softly, "Mom?" No answer. She walked through the hall slowly, heart hammering. The air smelled wrong, like old dirt and copper, like something decaying just beyond her sight. The basement door was open. It had never been open, not in her entire life. Wooden stairs disappeared into darkness. The light switch didn't work. She grabbed her phone and used its flashlight. Each step creaked under her weight. The walls narrowed. The air thickened. She reached the bottom. The concrete floor was wet, not with water. The light caught something smeared across the wall. Symbols, like the ones from the chapel, but fresher, still glistening. She could smell the iron in it. In the corner, a chair, chains on the arms and legs, scratches in the wall behind it. A photograph nailed just above the chair. Her father, eyes wide, drenched in sweat, looking at the camera like it was the last thing he'd ever see. Below the photo, another note. He wanted to lock it away. "You opened it." Emily staggered back. Her foot hit something. She looked down. Another box. Inside were videotapes, each labeled with a date, each one with her name. She took one, ran back up the stairs, out into the light. She didn't stop driving until she reached a friend's place on the edge of town. Gina, the only person she still trusted. Gina listened without interrupting, though her face shifted between disbelief and fear when Emily finished. Gina just nodded. "I believe you," she said quietly. They plugged in an old VHS player. The tape crackled, static, humming like whispers. Then, her as a child, 5, maybe 6, playing in the backyard, laughing. Then freeze the camera. Zoomed in on the house, on the upstairs window, a figure, watching. The tape cut to black. Then a different scene. Years later. Emily in high school, reading in her room, the same window, same figure, again and again. Tapes spanned decades, different homes, different towns, always the same figure, always watching. Her hands shook as she pulled the final tape from the box. It had no label, no date, just a single symbol, scrawled in red, the same symbol from the chapel. Gina hesitated. "Are you sure you want to—" Emily pressed play. At first, nothing, just darkness. Then breathing, labored, wet, her father's voice. "If you're watching this, I'm sorry. I tried to end it. I tried everything. But he doesn't die. He doesn't bleed. He just Waits. I thought if I stayed close to you, I could keep him away. That worked. For a while. But now he's hungry again. The tape glitched. Screamed. Then silence. Emily ejected the tape. She felt hollow, like something had been taken from her. That night, Gina insisted she stay over. They triple-locked the doors, covered the mirrors, left lights on in every room. But at 2:41 a.m., Emily woke to the sound of static. The TV was on playing a tape, one she hadn't inserted. It showed her, sitting up in bed, watching the TV. She turned her head. Slowly. In the corner of the room, he stood, still, silent, watching. She screamed. Gina burst in. But the figure was gone. Only the tape remained, still playing. Emily packed again, this time not to run. To end it, she returned to the chapel, alone. In her backpack, salt candles, her father's journal, the original tape, and a knife. She stood in the circle again, lit each candle, drew the symbols. Read aloud the incantation her father had transcribed. The wind howled. Candles blew out, one by one. Then he appeared. No grand entrance, no violence, just presence. He stepped from the shadows, like he'd always belonged there. His face was wrong. Features shifted, blurred, as if memory couldn't hold him. But his eyes, her father's eyes, no. Not exactly close enough to confuse, to wound. She raised the knife. "What are you?" He tilted his head. Then her father's voice. The other half. Her breath caught. She remembered the photo, the man beside her dad, the journal entry. We opened a door, two of them, her father, and something else, something that came through. A reflection, a twin, a parasite. "I've worn him," it whispered. "Now I'll wear you." Emily gritted her teeth. No. She sliced her palm, let blood fall into the circle, spoke the final words from the journal. Light erupted, blinding, burning. The creature screamed, not in pain but rage. It faded, left. Only dust and silence. Emily collapsed. When she woke, the candles were gone. The circle erased, the box empty, but the photo was still there. She picked it up. This time, she was alone in it, and yet something felt wrong. Too quiet, too empty. She returned home. The world moved on. Like nothing happened, but she couldn't stop watching reflections, mirrors, windows, shadows, waiting for him. Then, one morning, she found a new photograph on her doorstep. It was Gina, sleeping, and behind her, Emily, watching. Emily stared at the photograph, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't possible. She hadn't been in Gina's house that night. She knew she hadn't. She'd barely slept, hadn't even left her apartment. And yet, there she was, standing over Gina's bed, eyes hollow, hands folded in front of her like a child at a funeral, watching, waiting. Emily flipped the photo over. No note this time, just a smudge, red, thumb-shaped, like someone had pressed it against the paper just before it dried. She rushed to call Gina. No answer. She tried again. Nothing. Then her phone lit up with a message. She doesn't remember. Emily felt the world lurch sideways. She threw on clothes and raced to Gina's place. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything was still. Too still. The TV buzzed with static. A coffee mug rested on the edge of the table, still warm. And in the hallway, Gina. Standing. Motionless. Staring at the wall. "Gina?" Emily whispered. No response. She stepped closer. That's when she saw what Gina was looking at. A mirror. Not just a mirror. A frame with shattered glass. But the reflection still showed her whole. In the mirror, Gina's mouth was open, whispering something over and over. Emily leaned closer. 3 words. "He's not gone." Gina blinked slowly, turned to Emily, and smiled. But it wasn't Gina's smile, not the one she knew. This one stretched too far, hung too long, like someone imitating what joy looked like without ever having felt it. Emily stepped back. "What did you do to her?" The smile widened. "She let me in." Gina collapsed to the floor, unconscious, breathing, but barely. Emily dragged her to the couch, heart thundering, fingers trembling. She checked her pulse. It was shallow, sluggish, she needed help. But she knew calling anyone would make it worse. He, us, was already inside. Somewhere. And if she involved more people, he'd spread. She went back to the mirror, studied her own reflection, and froze. Her reflection didn't move. She tilted her head. The reflection stared straight ahead. Still. Cold. Then it smiled. That same wrong smile. She smashed the glass. It didn't crack. It laughed. Not sound. Not echo. But something deeper, a feeling that clawed its way into her chest. She ran, drove aimlessly, past the edge of town, past the state border, until her phone signal died and the roads turned to gravel. She pulled into an abandoned rest stop. Everything hurt. Her skin, her teeth, her thoughts. Like something inside her was trying to rearrange itself. She pulled out the journal again. One entry stood out now, one she hadn't noticed before, dated the day before her 6th birthday. It's chosen her. I saw her drawing it again, always the same face, always the same eyes. It's not interested in me anymore. It's learning how to be her. Emily dropped the book, the drawing, the one she found years ago. A child's scribble, a tall figure, no mouth, wide black eyes, standing behind a little girl holding a balloon. She thought it was just something she made up, but her dad had seen it, too. It had started long before the photo. It had always been watching her. She wasn't becoming like him. She'd always been part of it, or it, part of her. She screamed into the woods. A primal, desperate sound. But the trees didn't answer. They just stood still and listened. That night she stayed in her car, locked the doors, covered the mirrors. She dreamed again. This time she was a child. Back in the basement, but it wasn't dusty anymore. It was pristine, lit by flickering candles. She sat in the chair now, strapped down. And in front of her, him, or her, the reflection. "I'm tired," it said in her voice. "Tired of watching. Tired of pretending. You don't have to run anymore." It stepped. "Closer. I've worn so many faces, and yours fits best." She woke up with blood on her palms, not hers, and a new photo on the dashboard. This time, she was in it alone. Smiling, but the caption at the bottom, typed neat, read, "You're ready." She drove back to town, through muscle memory more than thought. The chapel was gone, burned to the ground. Only the stone circle remained, blackened, scorched. She knelt at its center and whispered, "What do you want from me?" The wind answered, one word, home. Emily stood. She knew what had to be done, the last tape, the one she hadn't dared watch. She returned to her father's house, back to the basement. Everything was just as she left it, except the chair. It was empty now, facing the wall, and in it, another photo, this one old, faded, burnt around the edges. Her father, holding a baby, her, and standing behind them, blurred, but unmistakable. The figure, it had been there since the beginning, before memory, before language, before her. Emily sat in the chair, pressed play. The tape was silent, just a room, empty. Then the door opened, and she walked in, not on the tape, in real. Life, another her, the same face, same eyes, but calmer. More certain, she looked down at the real Emily, smiled, and whispered, "Thank you." The screen went black. The room grew cold, and for the first time in her life, Emily felt still. Not peaceful. Just still. Like the last page of a story long, overdue, and in that stillness a thought formed. She didn't know who she was anymore, and maybe she never did. Emily didn't remember falling asleep in the chair, but she woke up there, alone. The basement was colder now, the air thinner, like something had been pulled out of it, like breath or memory. She stood slowly. Her legs shook. Everything felt different. The like walls weren't just walls anymore. They watched her, with invisible eyes, with expectation. The mirror on the far side of the basement hadn't cracked after all. It reflected perfectly now, too perfectly. She stepped in front of it. Her reflection blinked first and smiled, but this time it didn't feel wrong. It felt Familiar. The door creaked open above. She climbed the steps. Sunlight poured in through the windows, but it didn't feel warm. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Gina woke up. She remembers everything. Her heart seized. She raced to the hospital. Gina was sitting up, eyes red, voice hoarse, but alert. When she saw Emily, she flinched. Emily paused at the door. "Gina, it's me." Gina shook her head slowly. "No, it's not." Emily stepped inside anyway. "I don't know what I am, but I need to know what happened to him, to my dad." Gina stared at her, expression torn between fear and sympathy. "I remember him talking to something, in the mirror, every night. He said it was learning, copying, waiting." Emily sat at the foot of the bed. "There's more, isn't there?" Gina hesitated, then nodded. "I followed you one night, when we were 16. You walked all the way to the chapel. You were talking to someone. But no one was there." Emily didn't blink. "What did I say?" "You said, 'I'm ready now.'" Just like he was. She felt sick, the kind of sickness that lives in your bones, in your name, in your blood. Gina reached for her hand, but stopped short. "You're not like them, Em. Not yet. You're fighting it. But if you stop..." Emily stood. She didn't need to hear the rest. She knew the rest. Her dad hadn't just seen something in that mirror. He'd made a deal. And she was the payment. She returned to the house, to the room with the mirror. Stood in front of it again. She took the photograph from her pocket, the one that started everything, the one with her and her dad smiling, and behind them, the thing. She stared at the photo, then at her reflection, and whispered, "What do you want?" The mirror pulsed, light shifted, and something stepped forward. It looked like her, but older, wiser, eyes darker, lips thinner, a future version she didn't remember becoming. "I want what you offered," it said. "I didn't offer anything." "You did. You just don't remember." "But I do." It reached out, palm to glass. And Emily, for just a second, didn't move away. The glass rippled, and her hand slipped through. Cold wet, like dipping fingers into another version of time. "I can take the weight," the reflections whispered. "I am the weight." Emily closed her eyes. The silence stretched, and then she pulled her hand back. "No." The mirror trembled. The figure snarled. "You are me." Emily shook her head. "Maybe, but I get to choose." She smashed the glass. This time it shattered. With a sound like bones breaking, the room fell dark and silent. The silence was deafening, but real. She collapsed to the floor. Not unconscious, not possessed, just tired. When she woke again, it was dawn. She walked outside. The world looked the same, but it felt new. And she felt not whole, not healed, but real. Weeks passed. She moved out of her father's house, put it up for sale. No one bought it. The listing disappeared online over and over again. Eventually, she stopped trying. Some places weren't meant to belong to anyone. She started therapy, started writing again. She even met with Gina. They talked for hours, mostly about the past. But sometimes they laughed. One night, Gina handed her something in. An envelope. "I found it in my attic. Thought you should see it." It was a photo. A birthday party. Emily at 6 years old. And behind her, her father. And a third figure. No face, no hands. It just presence. Gina pointed at the edge of the photo. "You see that? There, on the fringe." Another Emily, hidden in. Shadow, watching. Emily stared, and this time she didn't flinch. She folded the photo, put it in her pocket and said, "Maybe it never ends, but I don't have to let it win." They hugged, and for the first time in years, it felt real, like something tethered her here, to this life, to this version. She still saw things sometimes, in windows, in reflections, in her dreams. But she never talked. Back to them again, not out loud, because now she knew they were listening, and she wanted them to know. She was listening too, just in case they ever forgot. She was still here, still her, and she wasn't going anywhere, not anymore.